Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Marcia Beckman, and thank you for participating in our webinar this morning called we're titling it the fifth indicator, not the fifth dimension. That goes back for some of us. I want to make sure we do an audio check. So I've got Michelle Pereira, our administrative assistant here. So how would we make sure I think you use the raising your hand. Just if you wouldn't mind just clicking that to be sure you can hear each of the speakers. Looks like we are just about there. Okay, that's good. One of the things too is, sometimes if we turn our heads, we can't be heard. So please say something if you can't hear any one of the speakers. Thank you. We also are going to be using the question box quite a bit this session. There are only about 9 slides in this entire PowerPoint presentation, so we don't expect to spend a lot of time presenting to you, but pausing quite frequently or anytime there's a question in the question box for the questions, as well as feedback. So you may be giving feedback, not necessarily asking a question. We appreciate that very much. And this is the second in our series of 4 webinars seeking all additional feedback from our stakeholders on our Idaho State Consolidated Plan. The plan is our application, again, for approximately $83 million in federal funds, and that most of that money, in fact, the majority, up to sometimes as much as 99% of it, flows directly to our districts to serve academically at-risk students. The Idaho Department of Education has been working to address all the areas required in the Every Student Succeeds Act plan. We've also been working well with the Idaho State Board of Education as our SEA, and to ensure that this plan is in synchrony with our Governor's Task Force recommendations and Idaho's strategic plan for K-12 education. The Accountability Oversight Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Idaho State Board, has led a lot of the work around the accountability section of this application. However, both board staff and Idaho Department staff have been very involved in the conversations and the discussions, and we've been appreciating that collaborative effort. So I'd like to do some introductions. Presenting and gathering feedback with me today are Debbie Critchfield. She's Vice President of the Idaho State Board of Education. And Debbie's attending this webinar in the comfort of her own home. And Karen C. and Allison Westfall. Karen is Federal Programs Director here, and Allison is the Director of Communications here in the room with me. Our goal is to share the school quality and student success indicators, often referred to as the 5th indicator. And we really we're hoping that we make sure that there is a clear understanding of all the indicators, both academic and non-academic, that will be identified and reported in our school report card. Also, to point out that when we have the identification of the lowest 5% of schools, the committee has decided and the department have talked about which of those indicators will be used in identifying the lowest 5% of schools that will be receiving comprehensive support and intervention. So we hope to answer questions and gather ideas about this indicator and implementing this indicator as well. Okay, let's go to our next slide. So I thought, let's talk about what is the 5th indicator. Well, Idaho's Consolidated Plan for Every Student Succeeds Act requires each state to identify indicators which serve as the criteria for which schools are measured in the following 5 areas. And so if you're planning or you're following along in the plan or you want to mark it, this is covered on page 14 through 16 in our ESSA plan. So the 5 indicators actually are divided into 2 areas, and let's look at the academic indicators. So the first indicator is academic achievement in English, language, arts, and math. I'd like to make a connection to the very beginning days of No Child Left Behind, when academic achievement in English, language arts was reading at that time, and math and participation were the only indicators we used. If you recall the old days, I guess those are old days now. The second indicator that's required is referred to as the other academic indicator. For all schools that are not high schools, must have some other academic indicator. In Idaho, we have chosen the growth of a school's percent of proficient students from one year to the next at the school level as this additional growth indicator. And in our previous webinar, the methodology behind that was described. The third indicator is for high schools only, of course, is graduation rate. And the fourth indicator is English learner proficiency. And then we have the non-academic indicator, which is referred to as the school quality student success indicator now. So just so you are aware, the non-academic indicator is really an area of challenge, but also opportunity for our states. Let's check and see if we have any questions at this point in time. Feel free to type things in. We're watching that question box. Don't see anything. Okay, without any questions at this point, we're going to delve a little bit more into the non-academic indicator or the school quality student success indicator. So on your slide, you'll see that we have divided these into three school categories, excuse me. K-8 schools, high schools, and alternative high schools. The indicators that you see in those three boxes are the multiple indicators that have been posed as the indicators that we would use when we are displaying information and holding schools accountable through the public display of information on our school report card. So all of those indicators that you see there are the ones we are looking to actually display information about those on the report card. However, for the purpose of identifying our lowest performing schools for comprehensive support and intervention, and in the following year identifying our schools that need targeted support and intervention, Idaho is going to use some of the academic indicators and some of these non-academic indicators. Idaho will not calculate a summative score as it was in the past with our 5-star system, but rather display the data for each indicator to allow patrons the opportunity to see the entire picture. Okay, next slide. Now you'll notice this one outlines again the same school quality student success indicators. For the purposes of identifying schools, our lowest 5% of schools that are both low growing and low achieving for support and resources, Idaho will use some of the academic indicators, as I said previously, and the non-academic indicators that you see in the chart above that are highlighted. So there you go. We are looking at, and these are what we are suggesting would be used in the identification of schools. This again would not start until the 2018-19 year. We would not be starting this fall. So the indicators that have been highlighted with the arrow for K-8 are school climate survey, again beginning in 18-19. For high schools, it is college and career readiness as determined by student participation in advanced opportunities and also earning industry-recognized certification in our career technical education field. That is the indicator that is designated as the one to be used when we are identifying our lowest 5% of schools. And again, that non-academic indicator is both an area of challenge, but it's an opportunity also for our state. So this is actually the area where we're seeking some input from you on any of the indicators you see in the framework, or specifically the ones we would be using to identify our schools that you see highlighted there. Just looking to see if there's any questions or clarifications. If anybody's interested in what's a little bit more information, we can cover that. I want to add one more.
We do have a question.
We do have a question. Let's look at that while we're getting that question out. We do want to show you that if we are using indicators for school identification, our lowest 5%, the process or the indicator must be able to be disaggregated by the following subgroups, which we use for all the other items. So keeping that in mind, you'll see all the different subgroups that we have there.
So the question, Marcia, is what is the plan to measure the high school, college, and career readiness? I think that's an area where we get some in.
That's helpful. It's one of my prompts, by the way, for questions. So I would actually appreciate any feedback from this group on what you are feeling would be workable. If you remember in the old 5-star system, we did have an advanced opportunities section to earn the stars for your school. Remember, we are not going to be giving stars or any kind of summative rating. So in this indicator, it would just indicate high school, college, and career readiness. As I mentioned, the verbiage says as determined by student participation in advanced opportunities. We have done that before. We have that data. And earning industry-recognized certification. So this is just a general opportunity. I think our big goal here today is to really ask, how you feel about that, what are your thoughts, and so on. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Eric's willing to help Allison with the survey. And I know, Eric, you were here about a week ago, and the Boise District certainly has all sorts of West Ada, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, Eric. And then another question. Alternative middle schools, where do they fit into this scenario? At this point, if they do not have a graduating class, the decision was made to keep them in then outside of the high schools or alternative high schools, but they are, because they don't have a graduation rate, they would be in the K-8 grouping. Okay.
So Lori Wolf has a question. Will the school climate survey be a statewide survey, or will each school choose their own?
For purposes of what is called meaningful differentiation in the plan, in other words, the results from one school can be compared to the results of another school by the public. These surveys or anything that we use as part of a survey for an indicator is going to need to be the same set of questions for all schools in that grade category.
Board Member Critchfield, I know the AOC, when they built their framework, they had some dialogue around that. Is there anything that you can add to the discussion?
We want to make it as easy as possible for districts, and so we would not ask them to generate their own survey. However, they could add to it if needed. And as we've been talking and Marcia has pointed out along, so far in this morning, we want to get feedback on what types of questions would be useful. The ultimate usefulness of the survey should benefit the local districts. And so if there are particular questions or specific things that you're all interested in, we would love to see what that is. And like I say, we have something that would go statewide. Everyone's going to ask the same questions, but again, if a district wanted to add to it for their own particular needs, I think that would be a great thing.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that very much. And I think Debbie has done quite a bit of gathering information for our work on this. And as she said, we do appreciate your thoughts on that. I mean, sometimes you might have to bring up what are some of the things we might need to think about as we go forward.
Marcia, Tara Reeves has a question regarding the percentage that perhaps the state is looking for as far as the college and career readiness at the high school level. determined by participation in advanced opportunities and CTE certificates.
Thank you. Thanks, Tara. Once again, this is probably the newest addition to accountability indicators under ESSA. This is the one we've not really had before, although Idaho did include advanced opportunities. So we took time to we want to take time to make sure that we look at what is the best way to do that. At this point in time, we're looking for suggestions and feedback from you on how that would best be calculated. But we do know we want to honor both advanced opportunities and tell that story about a school, as well as career technical education certification. I know that career technical education has had conversations with us about their pathway towards offering those certifications, and I think that there is some work in progress going on there. So,
Marcia, this is Debbie.
Sure.
I could jump in on the heels of that. One of the discussions that's been thrown around is to match the terminology of the plan and look at something that districts would set interim and long-term goals relative to the advanced opportunities. And if that's something that folks were agreeable to, that there's some type of a trajectory, or, you know, at this point we'd like to see this level, and further down we'd like to see this other level. We'd love to have some input on that to see how that could be formulated and developed.
Thank you, Debbie. That's exactly right.
Hi, Nick. Nick has a question. So the state's accountability framework requires all of the indicators indicated on the chart, and we will only use the highlighted yellow ones for identifying schools under ESSA.
So I'll respond, and again, Kara and Debbie, Allison, join in if you want to add more thoughts on that. The understanding is correct that what we would use for reporting would be all of the indicators. The items that we would use when we are determining our lowest 5% of schools, we would be using only those in yellow. Now, the other thing I just want to add before I open it up to any other comments from panelists is that the academic indicator chart I did not put up there. Do remember there's an additional chart of the academic indicators that we have, some of which would be used and some would not. One example would be on the academic indicator chart, which you see the recommendation and the legislature approved that we would actually have the IRI, and at this point in time for school identification, for example, that would be one that we would not use for school identification. But since it was about the fifth indicator, I didn't put that chart on. But thank you for that question.
One of the challenges we've been facing, particularly with that fifth school quality indicator, is of the choices we have on the framework, which of those can meet that standard of being able to be disaggregated by student, by school in each of the subgroups. So that's something that's been being considered as we look at what's the right fit for that indicator.
This is Debbie. If I could chime in again, this is a conversation that the full board will undertake at their August meeting, how to address that. So what's being presented today is identifying or using one of the indicators for identification and just kind of zeroing in on that. Or do we want to use more of the indicators that are in rule at this point for that purpose? And so we're talking about this today, and this is what, you know, we're putting out, but there will be a larger discussion on that in August. And so I guess this would be a great opportunity to get feedback on how school districts would like to see that handled.
Yeah, absolutely. So of the indicators listed there, are there ones that you think would be vital to that identification process of an indicator of whether a school that would aid in the identification of a low-performing school.
I'd like to add to that the thought that what we want to do is find things that really do indicate the performance of the school, as Allison said, and also, is it something that the department can provide support for, or that a district could provide support for their schools in showing growth or better achievement on that particular indicator?
We have one comment that the CTE data is not well tracked. Thank you for that comment. Another question from Nick regarding the survey. When parents complete the survey, how will we collect the subgroup information while maintaining confidentiality? That's a great question, Nick.
That is one of the big questions and considerations that I know as the board has this discussion that Debbie, you've talked of, I know those are all going to be issues that we'll try to bring forward, members of the board, the members of the Accountability Oversight Committee, members of the department, to understand how could that happen and how would that work. So thank you again for pointing that out. That is an issue we will need to deal with.
We have a question from Amy. Are you measuring this for just the graduating class?
Amy, I just would like to know, measuring the school climate, I'm assuming you mean the school climate or the college and career readiness for the graduating class. The answer to that is we're going to be looking at the school results, but I'll open that up to anybody else who wants to add to that. It wouldn't be just for the graduating class.
My understanding is that it would be an overall look at participation in those, whereas the monies are available 7 through 12. That should factor into that overall number, in my opinion.
That's my understanding also.
Thanks, Debbie.
Tara, thank you for your offer to help give input into the measure. Thank you. Nick, what other options has the state considered for the 5th indicator for identifying schools? And you can see on the screen that these are the these are the options that have been considered.
So this is Allison. So the options that they've been looking at, those identified in the accountability framework that was developed by the AOC and the board and brought to the legislature. There's been some conversations about chronic absenteeism, but stakeholder feedback was people didn't like that, and you don't see that on the list. So we've been working with those ones in the accountability framework. Debbie, do you have anything more on that? Since I wasn't here when the chronic absentee discussion came about.
That indicator was one of at least a dozen that were put out in each of the categories in the spring of 2016. And there was a resounding rejection of that one as even being a part of anything, let alone identifying schools. And so the framework was developed and subsequently presented to the legislature without that. And I, having had, now that the federal government is refining its rules and regs and all of that, the indication and other states are using chronic absenteeism because it's an easy one in that sense to disaggregate and to do all of those things. And I can only speak for myself and 2 other board members. I won't speak for the board, but in smaller conversations, we felt that we needed to keep the integrity of what Idaho wanted to do, and that we would err on the side of submitting the plan that we developed in our state that met the desires of the school districts and matched the feedback that we received. And so keeping those in mind, the ones that are shown on the screen here would be the only ones that could fit into the requirements for the federal government. That was a super long way around to your question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Debbie.
Nick is wondering, in regards to the communication with parents on student achievement, how will this information be collected and quantified?
I think, again, Nick, you get the award for the most questions and some of the hardest, okay? No. No, we appreciate it. Keep them coming. At this point in time, the discussion, and again, Debbie was a part of all the discussions as well. The discussion was around items that really show a school's success. And one of them is more for the public, and that is, do parents feel that they are getting good communication in regards to student achievement? But other than that idea, I would not say that we have fleshed out how that would happen. So that's going to, if we do that. But Deb?
No, I was going to say, I think that that's fair, Marcia, and perhaps we need a little construction hat next to that bullet point on some of these, under construction. Okay.
Perfect.
When we looked at that, one of the overriding principles, I guess, with the reauthorization in ESSA was more of a connection with parents to engage parents more in the efforts of their own students' achievement. And so when we look around the state, we know that schools are already doing parent-teacher conferences and have really pushed for more one-on-one contact, whether that's emails or parent nights or whatever form that takes. And so I think that the list could be longer than just a simply, hey, you've got to talk to a parent one time in the year, because I don't think that satisfies what we're going for. So again, if there are suggestions and if we can generate a list of ways that schools seek to engage parents and develop something, that will help us be able to quantify and put together a really nice framework that satisfies the accountability piece, but ultimately all of these things are meant to serve parents and schools better.
Thank you, Debbie.
Nick, thank you for expressing your opinion that your group likes the students in grade 8 enrolled in pre-algebra or higher courses, because that can be quantified and disaggregated by subgroup. Thank you.
College career ready, yes. Amy? Okay. And Amy says college and career ready, yes. Also thanks to Nick from Lori Wolf, because she was wondering the same thing. Margaret, Karen, you want to read that one?
Sure. Margaret asked, shouldn't communications with parents actually be communication with parents or guardians? And I would say yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
It looks like that's all the questions we have for now. So Marcia, do you want to go ahead and proceed?
Sure. Let's go past the subgroup. We're going to go to the next slide and past that one, because we talked about that. It's just a consideration that we need to be sure that all those subcategories that we can disaggregate by those.
Did we talk about this? Okay.
And so, again, I just have some maybe question starters for generating some other more questions, because really all the slides are completed. So things that we are interested in hearing, and I'm sure you have others. We've heard some of them already. This has been very helpful. Do you have any questions or comments about the fifth indicator, the school quality student success? I think we've been hearing some of those, but we would appreciate any more information. As Debbie said, this will be debated, or not debated, but certainly discussed at the August board meeting, and it would be helpful for everyone to come with as much information of what stakeholders want. I also reiterate, we certainly are respectful of the law and the rules and conditions around the federal law, ESSA. On the other hand, we also want to be conscious of the fact that this is Idaho's plan, and so if we are willing to have good reasons or explanations for approaching one of the requirements perhaps in a unique way or a little more innovative way to fit Idaho's needs, we are willing to do that. Okay.
So Nick, thank you for your suggestion on the communication with parents on student achievement. Your suggestion to create a list of best practices in communication that districts have, and then districts could respond to that. For example, do you have an interactive website, parent-teacher conferences, parent nights, email communication system for emergency contact with parents, newsletters, and etc.? Appreciate that.
That's helpful. It's also something that a district could use other districts who have some of these things as models to increase their participation. So it's actually quantifiable in some of those suggestions. That's very helpful.
Amy's asking, when will the school climate survey be given? What is the deadline for districts to submit suggestions for questions for the survey?
Because this will not be used until we identify schools in 2018-19, we are assuming that we have all of this next year, and we will be putting together a timeline for submitting questions and for making sure that people have a chance to respond to what those survey questions would be. So I think that's one thing. Any other additions to that?
Amy has a suggestion, and thank you, Amy, for this, to look at surveys from advanced ed, since most schools are already using those for accreditation. These are available online and paper pencil, which would be important for schools to have both options. I agree. There are many benefits to using an online survey and adding the demographic information questions. I'm sure many schools would appreciate using something they are already using or easily have access to, unless the SD is providing the survey platform to all. So yes, and we actually internally have thought about advanced ed. So thank you, Amy.
Debbie, I know that you folks had seen, I think it was a tool from Gallup.
Yes. And I guess we would just add that into the mix as to what would be available. But yes, in April, I saw a presentation from the folks at Gallup, and they have developed a student parent teacher survey that has an online platform. And we would, like I said, I think we just take a look at what they've got, and if schools are already utilizing something and know how to use it well, why not leverage some of that and see what we can put together. I did want to just add one little thing, and I guess I looked at the question of when the surveys would be administered. I just take a different side road to that same question, that ultimately we would want to have the survey out sometime before the end of the year. I can't imagine that we'd want to have schools administer it in May. That's such a terrible month as you're trying to get everything wrapped up, but you know, kind of late spring-ish would be my thinking as to when it would absolutely need to be out to, you know, parents, students, etc.
Kelly, thank you for your comment. Great idea on using the advanced ed survey information. And from Dawn, West Data uses K-12 Insight for surveys. The tool is very effective. Will I have to stop using this survey system?
Our group here, both board staff and department staff, are aware that there are many districts who do have their own surveys out there. So this is a question we are aware of and know that we would have to figure out how we could work with the vendors or with the district with their platform if there are specific things that we need to have that provide for what we're calling that meaningful differentiation. We're comparing the same set of questions from one district to another, from one school to another. So you raise a good point, and we are aware of your survey and other districts who have surveys that they're finding very successful. We are aware as well that one of the challenges of a survey is if the state puts out a survey and says to you, you can't put out anything, any other survey, you're not allowed to use any other survey, we would have to put out a tool that fits every district from our smallest to our largest, from the east to the west to the north to the south. And I think that would be very difficult to do and would impede the work you're already doing with good surveys. So the finalizing of using a survey like this would have to address that question. So thank you for bringing it up.
Nick brings up a concern. He says, I would be concerned if the state decided to use advanced ed as elementary schools do not have to be accredited in the state. If we went with advanced ed, would we have to start having our elementary schools accredited? And the answer to that is no. Margaret, do you have any sense how much additional district staff time or not administering and potentially monitoring the survey might take? Since we are already on tight budgets, it is critical to leverage what is available, as you are discussing right now. And that's so important to consider. Thank you, Margaret.
Margaret, I will just begin, and I'm sure other members of the panel will want to possibly add their thoughts on it. We have asked a couple of districts as we're getting to this point. The surveys that we know are out there, especially for, I'm not sure if this is just for parents or not, but the surveys, I think it's for any parents and students, are usually very short, 7 to 10 minutes. I don't think we can realistically expect to make it very long. Therefore, the previous question or the previous thoughts that we shared about working with that is going to require an actual separate group that works specifically on how this would look. I think we're going to rely on all of us to help put that group together, and all of you at the district level to find out how that would work. This is one of the reasons I say it's challenging, but it's an opportunity. Go ahead, Debbie.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut in. I wouldn't think that this would be a huge time sucker in a day. Certainly for parents, I mean, you're not going to have the parents come into the school and sit down and do it. I mean, that's something that is sent out just like you do now. And whatever system you use for students, again, I guess if you take class time for it, that's one thing. Otherwise, you would send it home. Teachers would be someone that they could do that on their own time. To me, the real investment in the time, the most valuable investment as far as staff and would be the evaluation of the data that you get, the information that you get back. That's where, you know, you hopefully folks will take the time is on that end rather than on the giving out, administering it end, but compiling the information and then being able to analyze it in a way that is beneficial to the classroom, to the district, etc.
Thanks, Debbie.
Dawn is asking, is the survey going to be targeted to both students and parents?
Now, Debbie, do you want to take that one? Because I can answer it. I think we have from what we have in the plan, but my understanding is it's student, parents, and teachers. So, Deb, would you be willing to?
No. Yeah, just what you said, Marcia. That's
okay,
the direction.
Okay, good deal.
And another question, does the fifth indicator that we use for identification purposes need to come from the list of indicators already adopted by the Accountability Committee and approved by the legislature? Or can it come from a different source? Can the state come up with something completely new?
Karen, would you read that question? I'm sorry, the first part of it cut out for me.
Sure. Does the fifth indicator that we use for identification purposes need to come from the list of indicators already adopted by the Accountability Committee and approved by the legislature? Or can it come from a different source?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, it needs to come from the list because that's what is in rule. And pending acceptance from the federal government, if we're put in a position where we need to reevaluate that, we would have to go through the rulemaking process to change those indicators.
Thanks, Debbie.
Another question from Dan. As you know, Boise School District has a large LEP population. Will there be a requirement that the survey be provided to our LEP families in their native language? If so, is it up to the school district to translate the survey to these families, or will SDE provide surveys in various languages?
Thank you, Dan. The question, and the last count I heard, the Boise district recognizes either 90 either languages or dialects. So you're the poster child, if you will, for this. So the idea is it does have to be accessible to people whether they are fluent in English or not. So that needs to be determined how we would do that, and if we are using a vendor for that service, do they provide it? And again, we'll also look at all the other extenuating circumstances like cost, etc. Certainly, if the state's requiring you to do a survey, I think unfunded mandates aren't very popular, so perhaps we would have to really be very serious about this discussion. And Deb, you can join in if you want here.
So I would say that it would not be the expectation that districts do that, that as Marcia, you stated, that if this is the indicator and it's a part of the accountability framework for all, that the burden of translation would be on the state end.
Thank you, Debbie.
And Don has a comment for you, Debbie. He says, from our experiences, surveys of students, parents, and teachers do take a significant amount of time.
Fair enough.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions at this time or comments.
I'm looking through some of the additional prompts, and I think our minds must think somewhat alike, because most of the questions we had to prompt other thoughts have been asked. Let me look through my list to see if there are anything here that we haven't discussed. Okay. We did get a little bit of feedback from a few districts, and I'll just share that right now, about surveys. And there's always that fear that only angry parents will take the surveys, but the feedback from a few of our districts who currently use them say that's really a very small number. It really did not appear to have any kind of a significant effect on the actual survey, as well as fear that kids won't take it seriously and they will put in bogus answers. And again, for the districts that we talked to, and really it was only 2 at this point right before the webinar here, it was they really don't seem to find that that was the case in those districts. Any other questions?
No more questions.
Okay, well, we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, I think, here, 5 minutes left. And let's go to our next slide. We have just 2 more. I just want to say, in this slide, we do give you the link, again, to the Consolidated State Plan. And the archived webinar that was done last week on school identification and long-term goals is archived, and if you click on that link, you'll find it on that same page, as well as the contact information for all 4 of us and our email addresses if you need to contact any one of us. And we're really encouraging you to continue to ask questions or what have you. Again, we try to keep you informed. And the last page I have of the PowerPoint here is just kind of a restatement of our invitation to these 4 webinars. The first one, of course, happened last week, State Goals and Accountability System. You can actually view the webinar. It's on YouTube. So if you click on that, you'll get that webinar, and then it's also a PDF form of the PowerPoint. This one will also go on the that same website that you see on the page previous, where we find the school plans, as well as a PDF form of the PowerPoint. Next week, I want to invite you to be part of this July 6th, the School Supports and School Improvement. In other words, what's the department going to do after we use these indicators? And I think we've got some things we are very excited about, and examined a lot of things we have found to be helpful and effective. We've made some tweaks to some of those, found new things, building more partnerships. So I look forward to talking to you more about that. And on July 13th, it will be Supports for Educators and Educator Effectiveness. And we thank you for participation, and we really hope to hear from you. We can go back to slide 8. Just contact me with questions.
We have a question from Kathy. What is the web address for the old webinars?
Actually,
Can you go back on
if
the
yeah, I would go to this address that you see under the words Idaho's Consolidated State Plan link, and when you do that, just use your arrow to go down towards the bottom of that page, and you're going to find actually the information on how to click to all those webinars. All right, it's been great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to listen and to provide the feedback and questions you have. It's really going to be prompting our work going forward. And again, we'll try to keep everybody informed. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the webinar. And
Thank you,
thanks to
Debbie.
everybody for their comments and feedback. It's very much appreciated and so needed.
Karen and Allison are nodding yes. I'm sure you heard that, right? Okay. Thanks again. Look forward to talking to you soon.